So the last time we met, I presented to you all the forecast that the NPO had prepared for future growth and development. And the forecast, based on our business as usual trends, wasn't looking too good in terms of how we were planning to, or how we were trending to develop our open space. Our forecasts for traffic congestion weren't too rosy. And so what we promised you the last time we met was that we would get together working with you all as partners to develop a regional transportation plan that began to address some of the critical issues that we saw in front of us as we look to develop our communities out to the year 2035. Now, I'm up here representing the Nashville area NPO, but I'm one of two NPO directors in Middle Tennessee, working alongside the Tennessee Department of Transportation and a couple of rural planning organizations that all have to come together collectively to plan for an area that's much larger than our own individual planning areas. Stan Williams is in the audience today, representing the Clarksville Urbanized Area NPO, and Gene Stevens is here with the Tennessee Department of Transportation Long Range Planning Division. So what I have to show you all today is really the product of the efforts of many people involved that extend beyond just the Nashville area NPO. So last time we met, I talked a little bit about where we had been as a region, that back in 1965, we had about 750,000 people living throughout the region. Today, we've grown to about 1.7 million people, and by the year 2035, we expect close to another million people to be living in Middle Tennessee. As we look to the future, it's important to understand that that would essentially mean we'd be about the size of Denver today by the time we hit that point in time. So as we look to shape our future, particularly with transportation investments, it's important to understand what we're going to be in the future and not allow our decisions to be made purely based on what we are today. This is the development pattern that I showed you last time we met. This represents the 750,000 people living and working throughout Middle Tennessee, the 10 counties that we call the Cumberland region here. So all those places in dark illustrate to you those parcels of property that were developed back in 1965. Today, we see a land development pattern that looks something like this, and based on our trends for growth, based on our current policies for land use and growth and development, we expect our land development pattern to look something like this in the future. And this isn't new to you. You saw this last year. Many of you have seen this 1,000 times since then. Also not new to you is the fact that that growth pattern that we expect to experience based on our business as usual policies is going to lead to several consequences to face in the future. One of those being congestion. This is a map showing you the daily reoccurring congestion in the Nashville NPO area based purely on volume, just the number of cars on the roadways competing for space with everybody else. By the year 2035, we expect congestion to look something closer to this. And even after we build all the projects, all the roadway and intersection projects that were adopted into the 2030 plan that was finalized back in 2005, we expect to be able to get congestion down to something that looks close to this. And the reason why you can't eliminate these red lines entirely from the map is that many of our corridors, particularly in the urban area, which is primarily what the NPO is planned for, are constrained by development. You can't simply knock down all the businesses along Gallatin Road or Charlotte Pike and expect to widen something from 5 lanes to 8 lanes. So we got to begin thinking about multimodal transportation solutions for many of our corridors across the region. We've talked a lot today already about the fact that we can't purely be in the business to build transportation facilities. We don't come to work every day to build a roadway or to implement transit service. We come to work every day to try to solve these various issues related to quality of life and future economic prosperity and environmental and financial sustainability. A couple of interesting statistics that Governor Paris Glendening shared with the Mayor's Caucus a few months ago relate to the changing demographics of our nation. And if you think about how the presence of children in a household lead you to make decisions about where you want to live, consider that back in 1960, about 1 out of every 2 households in the nation had children. We expect by the year 2025 that to drop to about 1/4 of all households. Another amazing statistic that I learned in my time with Leadership Middle Tennessee is that about 60% of all the people that ever lived to the age of 65 are still living today. So that speaks to the growing concern we have for the aging of America and the fact that people, as they age, have different needs than they do when they're younger. And our transportation systems in our communities are largely built around those that can drive their automobiles. Transportation is important to you because, on average, 18% of your annual household budget goes straight out the door to transportation costs. When you add that to your mortgage and your other non-discretionary spending, it leaves you very little to spend having fun. So the question is, how should we invest in our future? And this is a question we've been pondering very seriously since the last summit, but the work began on answering this question several years ago. And so what I have to present to you today, and more information is available on the website, is first, the fact that we have endorsed as a regional planning agency 4 guiding principles to direct the decisions that we make as a public sector. One is the principle of livability. And I won't read each of these to you now, but that's our first guiding principle, is to promote livability, to promote sustainability, to ensure prosperity, and to promote diversity, not only in diversity in our resources and our cultural assets, but diversity in the products that we provide in terms of providing transportation choices to people that want to live and work in Middle Tennessee. From those guiding principles, we have for your review and comment a set of regional goals that we're aspiring to as we try to decide what projects to fund over the next 25 years. They essentially boil down to maintaining and preserving what we already have on the ground. We've adopted a primary objective of fixing what we have first before we think about expanding or building anything new. We want to manage congestion to keep people and goods moving through the region. We want to encourage quality of growth and sustainable land development practices to cut down on the cost of building infrastructure. We want to protect the region's health and environment. That's the number one concern of many of you out there. We want to support the economic competitiveness of the greater Nashville area. We want to offer meaningful transportation choices to a diverse population, including the aging. We want to encourage regional collaboration, coordination, and cooperation and decision-making throughout the region on issues beyond just transportation. And finally, we want to practice thoughtful, transparent financial stewardship, ensuring that we meet those regional goals with our financial investments that we make over the next 25 years. So with that said, taking those guiding principles as direction and the regional goals as the objectives that we're trying to achieve in the end, the MPO Executive Board, made up of the city and county mayors throughout most of the 10 counties throughout the region, have developed 3 main policy initiatives that they're pursuing as it relates to drafting this new vision for transportation across the region. That first major policy initiative is that we need a bold new vision for mass transit. The second policy initiative is support for active transportation and walkable communities. The third initiative is preservation and enhancement of strategic roadways. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit more about this bold new vision for mass transit. I've got a map that you all have included in your packet that detail in spatial form where we would expect to see services in the future. And this is our long-term vision.